This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you need a website or domain, check out squarespace.com. Hey everybody, and welcome back to a new video. Do you find that mastering a new hobby like photography is frustrating, either with you coming home with bad photos or you not bothering to take your camera with you at all because you have such low expectations that you'll come home with usable photos? Being in the photography education domain has allowed me to see all kinds of boo-boos in photography, having seen and taken my share of thousands of bad photos. So in this video, I'm going to go through the 8 mistakes that people most often get wrong and how to get them right. My name is Simon D'Entremont and I'm a professional nature and wildlife photographer living in Eastern Canada. I make weekly videos giving you photo tips or taking you behind the scenes for nature photography. Subscribe if you want to see more. And let's be clear, I'm not putting anyone down here. It's normal to make mistakes when just starting out. So let's take a look at the most common mistakes I see people make and what to do about it. One of the most common mistakes I see is that people have under or overexposed photos because they changed their exposure compensation and either didn't notice, didn't even know what it was, or left it in the wrong setting from their last photo opportunity. In case you're in the didn't know what it was camp, exposure compensation is a setting that allows you to change the exposure brighter or darker from what your camera suggests is best when shooting in the semi-automatic modes like aperture priority, shutter priority, or manual with auto ISO. People who are new to photography often end up changing it inadvertently, messing up their photos, or left it unchanged from the last time they used their camera. The fix here is to look for this icon on the back LCD and making sure the indicator line is set at the 0 mark when you start the day. The second mistake I see all the time is the obsession with shooting at ISO 100. This comes from the advice often given that you should always shoot at the lowest ISO. Now the proper advice is that you should shoot at the lowest ISO after you have the shutter speed and aperture that you need to get the shot, but that latter part is often left out. As such, people are just told, shoot at ISO 100. Now, while ISO 100 is great when there's ample light or you're on a tripod photographing a static target where the shutter speed isn't critical, shooting at ISO 100 for action, sports, wildlife, indoors, or kids playing is just plain trouble. At that low ISO, your shutter speed is also going to be low, meaning blurry images. Or people will purposefully underexpose their photos to keep the ISO low, thinking it leads to better image quality. It doesn't. After you set the shutter speed needed to freeze the action and the aperture needed to get the depth of field you need, use the ISO needed to get the image the right brightness. If your image is too noisy, open your aperture more, lower your shutter speed, or get some light onto your subject to bring the ISO down. The third mistake I see is buying one lens to rule them all, so to speak. That is, buying a zoom lens that goes from the widest to the longest possible. Now, I'm not a fan of spending more money than you need to, but if you plan to shoot landscapes very wide and wildlife at the very long end, I don't recommend buying a super wide zoom like a 15-400 lens. The reason is that long focal length lenses with a very small field of view and short focal length lenses with a wide field of view need different optical designs to work their best. And putting them together in one lens means that the optical designers need to design something halfway between the two, leading to suboptimal performance at both ends. Buying one wide-angle lens for landscapes or architecture and a second long lens for wildlife is the way to go. Granted, it's not as convenient and more expensive, and if your goal is only to document what you've seen, a zoom lens with a wide range can be very useful. But if you want to take pretty or artistic or very sharp photos, I recommend you buy lenses designed for each genre specifically, like a 16-35 for the wide end and a 100-500 at the long end, and not a 16-500, for example. Buying a great lens for your current camera is the best upgrade you can do, rather than looking for a new camera body. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. I built my very own website using Squarespace and it was really easy. A website is just a great way to have a professional place online where you can show off your work, your service, or your personal brand. Social media are often showing off your work in short clips or thumbnails, and sometimes makes it difficult to monetize as they may not want links to external sites. A website is a permanent home for you and your work and your brand, presented in galleries or on pages designed by you that show them off at their best. There are lots of useful templates, including ones for specific genres like photography, which is my genre. Or if you're more daring and artistic, you can go outside the templates using the new AI feature called Squarespace Blueprint to help you personally curate your own build. It's also a great way to monetize your work by setting up an online store so you can take payments by credit card or PayPal from all over the world. And now with a new added feature of buy now and pay later with ClearPay and Afterpay. Go to squarespace.com and sign up for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Simon for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. The next most common problem is out of focus photos. The main culprits here are using the wrong focus points or focus mode. Most cameras can change the number of focus points from one in the center to a large number spread out. If you try too many focus points while trying to focus on one specific thing like a person or a wildlife, you may end up focusing on something else in the scene like grasses or trees. If they aren't moving around too quickly, one focus point pointed at your subject is best. On the other hand, trying to capture quick-moving subjects like sports or wildlife using one focus point is too demanding. It's just too hard to keep it steady on your target. This is the time to change to multiple focus points. On my Canon camera, I can change this on the back LCD or by pressing this button and cycling through the options. Modern cameras with eye or subject detection are making this easier these days by focusing on your subject either moving or static without changing the settings or the number of focus points. But many cameras still require you to manually change these. As for focus modes, most cameras have two main ones. One is called one shot and freezes the focus point at one place, often with a confirmation beep. Great for static targets, but if you shoot a burst of photos at a moving target, the focus point isn't moving and only your first photo will be in focus. Switch to autofocus continuous, AFC on many cameras or AI servo on a Canon, and that way your autofocus will track moving subjects so that multiple photos in a burst will all be in focus. The fifth issue I see all the time is using inappropriate shutter speeds. And this is understandable for beginners. There's no common sense way to know how much shutter speed is needed to freeze movement. Now there are two shutter speed issues. One is freezing subject movement. The faster your subject is moving, the more shutter speed you need to freeze it. 1/100th of a second for still targets, 1/500th for kids playing, 1/1000th for pro sports, and 1/2000th for fast flying birds. Now there's also camera movement that needs to be managed if you're not on a tripod and are shooting handheld. Given that longer focal length lenses produce more movement in the viewfinder and across the sensor, longer lenses need faster shutter speeds to compensate. If you're shooting still targets, a handy formula to determine the best shutter speed is 1 over the focal length. So use at least 1/50th of a second for a 50mm lens and 1/300th of a second for a 300mm lens. Note that cameras with image stabilized lenses or sensors will be able to cheat these formulas to your advantage, so you may be able to get away with less. If there's not enough light to get the recommended shutter speed, and to get these shutter speeds your ISO is going way too high, that's the time to pull out the tripod, where much longer shutter speeds are possible as the camera doesn't move. Like real estate photography, macro, night photography, and shooting the Milky Way. Just note that a tripod just manages camera movement, but doesn't compensate for subject movement. The next issue I see the most often is one that isn't really a mistake per se, but rather an opportunity for improvement. And that is always shooting at eye level. While shooting at eye level may make sense for shooting portraits or sports, for example, as being at eye level with your subject really works well. Original looking photos that stand out are often really brought to life by finding more innovative angles. In wildlife, shooting while standing up looking down on your subjects is the least effort option. But look what happens when you get down on the ground for the same shot with the same settings. Like these shots of mine. Getting to a more interesting angle is one of the best ways to get better photos. Up, down, sideways, or through things can really make your photos stand out. If your camera has a flippy screen, use that to explore new vantage points. The next time you take a photo, do yourself a favor and try 3 different angles, not just one. By the way, if you want to learn how to get great photos in backlight, check out my free ebook. You can get it for free by signing up to my email list. Link below. The next issue I regularly see has nothing to do with the subject. It's the background. Remember, most photos have more pixels dedicated to the background than the subject, and yet for many new photographers, they don't give the background a second thought. A distracting background can really undermine the beauty or character of your subject and draws the viewer's eye to it. Not what you want. Turns out most advanced photographers will place as much effort into getting the background they want as the subject they want. They explore angles and will move their subject to get a pleasing background behind their intended target. A nice sunset or sunrise, tricks with light, moving the background farther away and more out of focus, and getting lines or patterns that accentuate the subject are common strategies. And don't forget, the same applies to the foreground. And I promised you a bonus tip, and this one is more in the can do it better camp than a mistake, and that's always putting your subject in the center of the photo. Getting good photos is as much about composition than settings, and the center is usually the least attractive place to put your subject. Most photos look better with some room, either to create some leading lines or having room for your subject to look or move into, which I use for wildlife all the time. For landscapes, if the sky is interesting, leave more sky than land. If the sky is boring, allow more land than sky. For portraits, leave room in front of your subject. For landscapes, move prominent features to the sides. Now, is the center always a bad idea? Not at all. For photos that have symmetry, the center can help emphasize the symmetry between the two halves, and the center can work, like these shots of mine. But this is the minority of photos. If my first tip about exposure compensation got you interested in how that works, you can see a whole video I made about it right here. If you thought this video was deserving, please give it a like, and that way even more photographers will get to overcome these challenges. And I hope that you can use these tips the very next time you go out, so you too can come home with your own original and beautiful photos. I know you can do it.